Bruce Lee put it this way, the guy that has practiced 1,000 kicks does not make me afraid. I do not fear the person who has practiced 1,000 kicks. I do fear the person who has practiced one kick 1,000 times. For him, it's muscle memory. He's in the zone in his life, day to day, moment to moment. He's always in the flow. So there's an expression in Taoism called Whey, Wuwei, Whey, which literally translates to...
This week, I interviewed author and professor of wellness at Elon University, Bob Martin. Bob blends Taoist wisdom, brain science, psychology, and humor to tackle everything from breaking free of limiting beliefs to finding clarity and resilience in life's chaos. We discussed all things meditation, along with how to be present in today's age, how to get into the flow state, the importance of getting your ego out of the way, and much, much more. Really enjoyed my interview with Bob. I know you will too. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. All right. Welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Gryn, and I have Bob Martin on. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Brian. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. All the way from North Carolina, but now you're in, is it Costa Rica, you said?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Just south of Nicaragua and north of Panama.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. And just looking through your bio, I mean, you've been through a decent amount. Criminal lawyer, author. Now you teach at Elon University?
Yes, sir.
Well, maybe give a little background about yourself and what got you into, I know you're into teaching mindfulness and wellness over there. So just the audience get to know you a little bit.
Sure. So, in some ways, my story is pretty common. And when I say it's common, I mean, we live our lives and we make our decisions and we get ourselves involved in situations. And, if things go well, that's great. But sometimes things start to fall apart and you feel like you're just losing it and you're going down a rabbit hole. And it's at times like those that you seek out, and hopefully you seek out some help. And that's my story. And that was transformational. So that in that way, it's pretty common. But in the particulars of it, it is unique, I will say. I started out in amusement parks. My folks, who were Eastern European immigrants, decided that popcorn and cotton candy was their path to the American dream. And so I grew up in amusement parks with cotton candy and popcorn and hot dogs selling on the boardwalk and that kind of thing. And then, much to my dad's dismay, I'll say, I became a lawyer. He didn't think much of lawyers. And it was a wonderful decision. I still wonder how it happened, because I had a very mediocre college career and there was nothing exceptional about me. And somehow one law school decided they'd take a chance on me. But it was down in Miami, and it was during the 70s. And that was the time of the cocaine cowboy days. You've ever seen the movie Scarface with Al Pacino or the show Miami Vice? That was the vibe. Miami was completely nuts in those days, and they called them the cocaine cowboy days. And I was a prosecutor then, so I can tell you, I promise you, I've got a lot of stories. But I rose to be in the Consumer Frauds and Economic Crimes Division, and that's both criminal and a civil division. So we go after money launderers, and we went after the mob and hit them for $72 million. And shortly thereafter, I decided I'd hang my shingle out, and I got a visit from the mob.
Oh, wow.
And they came in, Johnny, he came in, and basically he said that, we have pretty good lawyers and you were able to beat them. And so, we're thinking we'd like to refer some people to you. So they did. And I started to make a lot of money, oodles and oodles of money.
So the mob,
the
mob was impressed, and they ended up hiring you, not hiring you, but referring business to you.
Yeah, when I say there is a distinction there, because it wasn't like I was consigliere. I wasn't like the inside advisor. I was just somebody. They had middle management, just like any other organization. They had mules and they had wholesalers and the like. And so I was getting those referrals when those folks got busted. And they always came in and they always paid cash, and always underneath the federal limit. for reporting cash transactions. And that's how things went. But it was Miami and it was the cocaine cowboy days. So I'll let your imagination kind of run free with what I was doing, hanging out with those guys, going to the chrome and glass discotheques of Miami during those days. And my personal life was falling apart. I was able to hold my professional life together, but things were going bad. And I was seeing a therapist, and I came across a couple of real important life decisions. And I asked, of course, he was my confidant, he was my therapist. I went and asked him questions about what I should do. Should I go right or should I go left? And he gave me some advice, and he basically gave me the advice by throwing some coins and doing some math and coming up with a number and opening up a book to that chapter number and showing me the chapter. And I got real pissed off and I stormed out of his office. But the name of the chapter was Retreat. And I did. And it saved me. I pulled back from some of those excessive behaviors and went back and I asked George, what was all that about? Turned out he was the disciple and he was the English language editor for a very prolific man called Master Watching Ni, who was a 72nd generation Taoist master from the Shaolin Temple. You know, the Shaolin Temple's Kung Fu, Tai Chi, all of that stuff, the Taoist stuff. So I had never grown up with any kind of religious training or background or the like. My folks, it wasn't a conversation we had. All my ancestors were wiped out by either the Bolsheviks or the Nazis or the like. And so, you know, they just didn't think that there would be a merciful God that would allow all that. So I was wondering what Taoism was. And since it's not really a God-oriented belief system, it's more of a operating system for life, kind of like an operating manual. And I'd never been shown anything like that. I took to it and I studied at the feet of this guy, and Master Ni he just blew me away. He's one of those folks you run into him and you say, I just want to know what this guy knows. And so I studied under Master Ni, and I would say that was transformational, and it got me into the realm of contemplation and Buddhism and meditation. And eventually, just about the time it was all coming together in the training, I ran into some problems with my mob clients. And I think we all decided it would be better if I left Miami. So I wound up moving to North Carolina, and I had an opportunity to start my life over. And so when I got here, based on the fact that I just wasn't the same person that I was before I started my studies, I devoted myself to public service. And really, Brian, I'll share this with you. It's kind of, I don't often share this, but during that process, something happened to me. And I really can tell you that your heart can open up. There can come a time when your heart physically, there is a physical sensation of your heart opening up. And when that happens, the most important thing in your life, what gives it purpose and meaning, is to ease the suffering of other folks. I don't say that lightly. I just say it because I just say it factually. And so that's where my life went after that. So when I came to North Carolina, that's what I engaged in. And it led to the marriage of my second wife, who was a Southern Baptist Bible literalist. And so now I added Christianity to my repertoire of things that I studied. And that brought me to where I am.
When did you start working at Elon University?
So I retired from day-to-day lawyering in 2015. And then Elon asked me to come and teach law to undergraduates right away within a couple of months. And for the past few years, I've been kind of pushing them and nudging them to allow me to create a credited meditation course. And just a couple of years ago, that happened. So now I actually get 15 college students every semester, and they get 2 credits to take the course. And I get to teach them meditation. And more importantly, I get to see their minds open up. And it's just cool.
Yeah, that's great. And I coach high school golf, and I always thought they should have a class for meditation in high school.
Mm,
Yeah, it's great that you're bringing it to college. What would you explain to people? How do you like explain meditation in general terms, and what it is and what it isn't, and how to sort of develop a practice?
okay. Well, a lot of people, say they kind of interplay the words mindfulness and meditation. And I usually answer that by saying, well, there's the old expression that you can put a boat on a ship, but you can't put a ship on a boat. And so all meditation is mindfulness, but not all mindfulness is meditation. So, if I am being mindful of something, all that means is that I'm going to pay attention, and I don't even like the word attention so much. I'm going to attend to whatever it is that I'm doing. So if I'm making a bed mindfully, then I'm going to attend to making the bed. I'm going to pay attention to how I spread the sheet out, and I'm going to smooth out the wrinkles, and I'm going to pay attention to how I tuck the corners and line things up. And you actually, to do even mundane tasks mindfully can be quite enjoyable. You
It's
can,
like being present.
being present and attending, it's right. And so like I say, even washing the dishes, and stacking them up and feeling the warmth of the water and feeling the soap on the dishes and seeing the dirt come out and feeling the little thing that's stuck and getting the little sponge and rubbing it off and seeing it come off, and just paying attention and attending to all of those little details actually is a whole lot better way of passing time than grumbling about the fact that your partner ought to be the one washing the dishes instead of you, right? So that's mindfulness. Meditation is a more structured process where we actually, go through building skills, managing the mind. A lot of people, whenever they find out that I'm a mindfulness meditation teacher, they go, "Oh, yeah, meditation. I really need to meditate. I really need to do that." But it's not for me,
Hmm.
because the moment I try to sit down and quiet my mind, then my mind goes crazy, and all I have is all these thoughts about all this stuff. And I could never do that. I could never quiet my mind. And I would like to metaphorically kind of grab them by the shoulders and say, no, 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 that's not what we're trying to do with meditation. We're not trying to quiet the mind at all. Matter of fact, you can't. And the more you try to quiet the mind, the louder it gets.
Hmm.
So we know that that doesn't work. So what then what are we trying to do? So what we do is set up a simple process that's very common, that we all have experienced before. And I'm sure, Brian, that you've been in times and periods where you're listening to somebody and you really want to hear what they're saying. And then all of a sudden you notice that for the past 45 seconds, you haven't been listening to them, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Okay. So if you notice it, that when you notice that you're not listening, there's a kind of little startle feeling. That's the only way I can describe it. A little like, oh, like little sneezy. Oh, I'm not listening. It's like all of a sudden you realize it. It's like a realization comes into your head.
Hmm.
And that's because, your mind, you had told your mind already, I want to listen to this guy, because you were listening to him and you were interested. So your mind kind of reaches out and says, "Psst, hey, Brian, hey, you're not listening," right? And
Sure.
at some point you finally hear that. And then you kind of like wake up and then you go, oh, and then you have all this flood of judgments usually comes. I should have been listening to him and I wasn't listening to him. And how am I going to hear what he said? And blah, 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 blah. And then all that quiets down. And then you just go back and start listening again, right? So that's meditation in a nutshell. That's what we do in meditation. It's no more difficult than that, except we just set it up artificially. So we say, instead of listening to somebody, I'm going to form an intention to pay attention to my breath or a candle. And then within 3 seconds, your mind goes flying off to whether you left the stove on and what your wife's going to say about your being late and what you should have said to that guy yesterday, your mind's going to go nuts. At some point, your mind's going to go, psst, hey, you said you were going to pay attention to the candle, okay? And so we call that waking up. And so actually, the training and the healing and the practice of meditation comes in waking up and allowing the judgments to quiet down and then returning and beginning again. That's where the meditation occurs. So if your mind doesn't run off, if it doesn't wander, if it doesn't go nuts, you're not meditating. So that is what makes the difference. Now you might ask, so what does that get you? Well, what do you get out of that? Well, if you do it a little bit, I'm talking a little bit, you do that, 5-10 minutes a day for a week or so, all of a sudden you start to kind of get used to that. And then a very magical thing happens. All of a sudden, you notice that all of these thoughts that you were inside of, like a fish inside of water, you didn't even know you were inside of your thoughts. All of a sudden, you find that you have stepped outside of your thoughts and you're watching your thoughts. And then it occurs to you, oh, I'm not my thoughts. And then the next question that comes up is, if I'm not my thoughts, then who am I? And then that question leads to a whole bunch of other questions like, well, if I'm not my thoughts, then I guess I'm the creator of my thoughts. So what are my thoughts and what are the patterns of my thoughts? So now you become curious about watching your thoughts and watching your thinking. So it's not the fact that your mind is on its own and thinking about stuff. It's about the fact that you're noticing your thinking. And by noticing your thinking, you're adding to your database of who you are and how you think. And that means that you now have access to learning how to skillfully manage it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's for someone, I mean, I guess for me, my experience with meditation is, I mean, I do about 10 minutes a day, and a lot of times it's self-guided. Sometimes I'll listen to an app or something from time to time, but yeah, I agree. I mean, like if you try to control your thoughts, it's that much more difficult. It's almost to me like what you were talking about was like you're more just like self-aware. I don't know of just like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, self-aware of like what's going on. And I think people who, I don't know, you can sort of tell maybe people who practice meditation because they don't maybe react right away. They don't react first. They sort of take situations in and then they come to a decision. I don't know if that's something that you
Yeah,
see
yeah.
from practicing. Yeah.
We call it the difference between being reactive and responsive.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not reacting to things. It's not knee-jerk reactions. You're responsive. We asked Master Nee once, and I helped. I said, what is it like to be Master Nee? What's that like? And he simply said, no rehearsing thoughts, no rehearsing thoughts. So he has practiced this enough so that he never has to think about what he's going to say or what he's going to do. He's just kind of there. And when something happens, he responds to it. But his responses were always, perfect. And, that can take us into a whole other conversation of Taoism and going with the flow and
Mm.
how Taoism, what does going with the flow really mean? What is that really all about? Is that about just, tossing yourself on a raft on the river and floating downstream? Or is there something more to it than that?
Well, I am curious to learn about that because, yeah, I think of going with the flow as a little bit like what you said. You're not reacting, you're sort of responding to situations and maybe not being, I don't know, not being pulled in certain directions per se. What is your definition of going with the flow?
Going with the flow, it has two parts to it. One is, and this you have to begin to be able to identify the flow. First of all, how can you go with the flow if you don't know the flow? So you have to be able to identify the flow, and so many of us don't identify it accurately. And then once you have identified the flow, then what is the wisest way to align yourself with it? So I often think of the metaphor of being out in the ocean and you are trying to get into shore. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. One is, you can panic and drown. Well,
Sure.
that's not effective or efficient.
Right.
The other is you can say, okay, that's where I want to go. There's the goal. I want to go to shore. Now I'm just going to swim in. And you just swim, screw the flow, whatever the flow is. I don't know what the flow is. I'm just going to get there and I'm going to swim. And you may get there, but you're going to be tired and you're going to be exhausted, and certainly not effectively and efficiently. If you identify the flow and you get it, that sometimes the tide is moving towards the shore and sometimes it's moving against the shore. If you identify that and you align yourself with it, then what you're going to do is when the tide is moving forward towards the shore, you're going to use all your energy and swim like heck. And when it turns around and it's going against you, you don't want it to push you back. You don't want to lose ground. So you got to put out some energy, but just enough to hold your position. And you want to use that time to restore your energy and prepare for when it goes again towards the shore so you can swim like heck. So your process if you align yourself with the flow, you swim like heck, you hold. You swim like heck, you hold. Then you're going to get to the shore. You will have expended the least amount of energy and been 10 times more impactful and efficient. And what Taoism and what Master Ni taught me is that it is possible to identify that inside of your life and live your life within that. Like even, like when you're in a conversation with somebody, there is a flow.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're just not up for listening to you. So that's an oppositional flow. Sometimes they're eager to hear what you have to say. And that is, a propitious flow. So if you can sense when people, like if somebody, is not in the mood to listen to you, well, then, shut up. Don't force them.
Some people don't know how to do that.
That's that's the problem. That's what I mean by identifying the flow. Somebody asked me in another podcast, they said to me, we were talking about different times. And I said, well, there's a time to progress and advance, and there's a time to retreat. And he goes, yeah, but for entrepreneurs, if you talk about retreating, you're talking about giving up. And I said, interesting that you should say that, because if retreat for you means giving up, that means you were not sensitive to the appropriate time to retreat. You missed it. There was a time to retreat when you could have pulled back and regrouped. And you needed to pull back and regroup because you were wasting energy by pushing forward at that moment. So you need to pull back and regroup. Then, having regrouped, the time is going to change, and then you could move forward again with force. So it's not that retreat is surrender. It's that you miss the appropriate time to wisely retreat in an effective and efficient way. And if you do that and you're sensitive to those times, well, you are using less energy too. So you're using less energy and you're more impactful. What could beat that? What could beat that?
I almost could equate it. I was thinking of a few things.
Yeah.
One, like for example, I talk about like working out, right? Sometimes people think more is better, and a lot of times that's not true. And so those are people who maybe I don't know if it's not self-aware or aren't aware of the fact that recovery is just as important as the actual workout. So that's almost the recovery is like the retreat, and the workout is you're pushing ahead. And if you're
Right.
always pushing ahead and you're never recovering, you're just going to spin yourself into
And you can do damage,
right.
you know?
Yeah, you can do right. You can sort of lose momentum and end up doing work, and you end up becoming less of what you wanted to become.
Right. I mean, if you go and pull your hamstring because you had to do one more set, right?
Right.
And you pull your hamstring, well, you're down for 3 weeks now. That's neither efficient nor effective.
Yeah. Would you say this is different? I'm curious. Like, I always like to equate things to golf, but like we hear about in golf, like being in a flow state,
Right.
and there's guys that are better at it than others. You see this at
Mhm.
any level. And I think of it as like when you're in a flow state, you're not really internally taking thoughts like internally, or you're not like overthinking, you're just sort of reacting.
Right, 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 right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yes, absolutely. Some other folks call it, being in the zone. Yeah. So what we understand it completely when we're talking about athletics.
Yeah.
We get it. We get that because we use the term muscle memory. But Bruce Lee, Bruce Lee put it this way: the guy that has practiced 1,000 kicks does not make me afraid. I do not fear the person who
Hmm.
has practiced 1,000 kicks. I do fear the person who has practiced one kick 1,000 times. Because when you get to that state, you own it, and that's what Master Nee was talking about when he said no rehearsing thoughts. He has he has studied, 74 generations, 72 generations, passing wisdom down from father to son,
Mm.
and starting at a very young age of 2 or 3 years old, being taught, the different characteristics of the different flows. He grew up, for him, it's muscle memory. He's in the zone in his life, day to day, moment to moment. He's always in the flow. So there is an expression in Taoism called Whey, Wuwei, Whey, which literally translates to doing, not doing. And it means you do nothing. It's like, it's not me that's acting, something's flowing through me. It's that you do nothing, yet nothing remains undone. So it's almost as if you're not doing it yourself, but everything that needs to be done is getting done somehow.
Mm.
And that is that state of flow. Yeah. So, we want to try to get there. And meditation is one of the ways that you begin to become more sensitive to feeling the flow. Because, when you're playing golf, right? You might look at something and you could put your eyeglass on and say it's 347 yards and this calls for this thing. But you just might feel that, yeah, no, I think an iron, I just feel like the iron is what I need here.
Mm.
And you really can't explain it, but it's the
Right.
right choice.
Yeah. And you talk about like owning it. I
Mm-hmm.
think that and this is just my personal experience, but like the really good players are the guys that own their swing and don't
Mm-hmm.
try to be anyone else. And they've owned it for so long that they can just get into that flow state, as opposed to someone who's trying something new every week, which we're all guilty of that. I always tell people, just stick with one thing. It's almost like your quote with, what was your quote with? I read his book too. The quote you just had with the Kung Fu master.
Oh, no rehearsing thoughts?
No, that you could do the same kick 1,000 times, or
Oh,
the
oh, oh, Bruce Lee. Yeah,
Bruce.
yeah.
I just
I
drew a blank.
fear the man who has practiced one kick 1,000 times.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
almost like one shot. Like for golf, I think like guys that really own their shots, they hit the same shot pattern every time. Doesn't matter the situation. They hit a little fade all day long. They've been doing that forever. As opposed to maybe someone else who tries to hit different shots. Not now I'm getting into golf, but not to say that's necessarily
That's okay.
wrong, but like just focusing on one thing and getting really good at that, I think that can help put you into a flow state more so than just trying to do different things all the time. So that's just,
Absolutely. At least as it pertains to that. But of course, even in golf, there is the long yardage hole, and there's the short yardage hole, and there's the dog leg, and there's this and there's that, and sometimes, so there's also the problem that could come up there, of being a one-trick pony, or having a single winning formula, like one of our politicians who's about to become our president. I'm not going to be critical here, but I will say he is a one-trick pony. He has one way of dealing with a conflict. He's going to deal with that conflict by attacking. I'm not being critical here. I'm not saying that attacking is bad, but there are some times when that's not the best response. And if it's all you got in your toolbox,
sure.
then you're going to be really one dimensional.
What would you say to someone that hasn't implemented any spirituality or meditation into their life? What would you say like a good step for them to do? Would it be to read a book about it? Just, take a class?
I would say the first thing is to recognize that you have decided to live a very hard life. That's the first thing. You have decided that you're going to shoulder all of the burdens of life and you're going to carry that load through your whole life. And that ain't fun. I mean, if you don't have any sense that there's something greater than yourself out there, if you don't have any sense of it takes it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to recover. It takes a village to progress. It, it so I would say first come to the recognition that you just decided to make a very hard life for yourself, and life doesn't need to be that hard,
Mhm.
That's not that may sound like a simple statement, but it sure is not an easy one, because that dang Marlboro Man. You remember the Marlboro Man?
Mhm.
I mean, that's the icon of American masculinity. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, the individual guy out there on the field in control of his herd. All I need is my good old Marlboro cigarette. Not,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, the Marlboro Man, it's just a hard life, and it doesn't need to be that hard. So a lot of people, I think that Marlboro Man icon, that idea of American masculinity, has done an awful lot of damage to people's basic level of happiness. And so the first thing is, I would say that you need to question that. And I grew up in a home where there was no God conversation at all. Like I mentioned, my folks, you know my folks' ancestors, my dad was Hungarian royalty. The Bolsheviks killed all his ancestors. My mom was Roma Gypsy. The Nazis wiped out all hers. They didn't believe that there could be a merciful God, and I didn't have that conversation at all growing up in my life, and life was hard. When you begin to allow for the fact that there might be something out there that's bigger than you, and I'm not saying that you even need to accept it as a fact. You don't have to believe in God. Use it as a working hypothesis. If you just accept it as a working hypothesis and see, how does it feel to be living a life where your purpose and meaning is not all about you. And play with it for a while. Play with the idea a while. Experiment with it a while. Go and offer somebody a compliment. Tell somebody that scarf perfectly complements their complexion. And just see, how it makes you feel. Because there's nothing wrong with being happy.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong. I mean, the one thing that unites all of humanity, the one thing that we all want, is simply to be happy. And there are things that get in the way. And for the most part, what gets in the way, what in Buddhism we call the three poisonous roots:
Yeah, what are those?
wanting,
Hmm.
they're wanting, or at the extreme, it would be greed. I want and more, and it's never enough. And I want the new car smell in my car to remain forever.
Hmm.
I like that. I want what I like. And wanting. There's hating and repulsive, and I don't want to grow old. I don't want this. I don't want that. And then the other is just ignorance, having no idea how the system around you, the environment that you're in, works. And so never knowing when you're going to get whacked upside the head and from where. So these are the things that create the anxiety. And it's all mostly about me trying to protect me from all of those boogeymen that want to get me. And so I hold up this shield and I protect myself. And it comes down to, I think, that, Brian, I have to admit to you that I suffer from imposter complex. I think we all do. I still think that the law school that accepted me, I tricked them.
Hmm.
And I really fooled the bar examiners to licensing me and all that stuff.
Right.
But, finally, all that stuff is kind of just background noise, but we feel like we have to protect ourselves because at some level, many of us feel that if you really knew who I really was, if you really saw behind my social facade, you wouldn't like me. I'm really not very lovable. And it's funny because I call that the double reverse whammy of life. Because the reason I don't feel like I'm lovable is because my mama was trying to protect me from walking out into the street and getting hit by a car. So when she saw me, she screamed and yelled and grabbed me and jerked me back onto the lawn. And I thought that she was telling me I was a bad person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now there are people that are treated very badly as children. And of course, their sense of I'm not lovable is very, very powerful. But even for the rest of us who had wonderful parents, there's still a whole bunch in there that we misinterpreted. But I can't come up to you on this podcast and say, hey, Brian, my name's Bob Martin. I'm a jerk. So I have to create this public facade that I have and present that to you as who I am, because that's lovable and nice and it's good. And the funny part about it is that the truth of it is that the unlovable person I believe is really my true self is really not my true self. It's a made up vision of myself that I made when I didn't have the ability to put things into context. And the facade that I created it so I really know what those qualities are, which means that really is who I am. So the person I think I am, I'm not. And the person I don't think I am. So no wonder we have this kind of come closer, push away, come closer, push away, roller coaster relationships in our lives. And what we find is that when we can finally drop the shield and can finally say, hey, man, I am who I am and I is who I is, and I'm Popeye the Sailor Man, and what you see is what you get. So we get ourselves out of the point of the whole thing is, going back to your question, I'm sorry it took me so long to get there, but if I can be who I authentically am with you and get my ego out of the way, I find that I'm happier. And your question about spirituality is all about getting the ego out of the way. So whatever course I can take, whatever thinking I can have, whatever paradigm I need to enter into, when I can get my sense of ego out of the freaking way, I'm going to find that I'm a lot happier. And that's where I want to go.
Interesting. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry it took so long to get there.
Yeah, no, there was a lot there. Yeah, and I think what you're talking about sometimes takes time for people, right? Like I just think of like I'm in my 40s, but like when you're in your teenage years and 20s, even, like you don't come to this realization, right?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to be crude, but when you're a teenager in high school, I mean, your biggest issue is not standing up after you've been looking at that pretty redhead.
Yeah.
I mean, you're driven by such hormones and the like, and you're all about you, and that's fine. You need to go through that stage because
Sure.
you need to get a sense of your power, because that's another, you need to get a sense of your power, because that if you mature properly becomes another tool to use. There's nothing wrong with being angry. Sometimes you need to be angry, especially when you're talking to the utility companies, when you call about your phone bill. Sometimes you just have to be angry. It's the only way to move forward. But you don't want to be uncontrollably angry.
Yeah. How can meditation have a role in helping with like weight loss and sort of breaking free of like limiting beliefs?
So one of the very first things that you learn in skill building is that your thoughts, well, you're not your thoughts, but your thoughts are nothing. I mean, you start thinking about your thoughts and watching your thoughts. And sometimes I kind of liken them to being a deep sea diver in my, full deep sea get up and like hanging out in the middle of the ocean, like, half a mile down. And I'm looking down at the blackness down there, and these bubbles are coming up. And those are my thoughts. I have no idea where they're coming from, right? And we don't know. They come up and then they're here for a little while and you can see them,
Sure.
and you can identify them. And then they go up and they pop and they're gone. And then another one comes up and it's here for a while and he pops. So what is it? I mean, what are they? I'm not saying you shouldn't be discerning and you shouldn't make use of them. I'm just saying they're ephemeral. You can't hold them in your hand. You can't market them. You can't sell them. So when you start to meditation, first of all, it's not a magic wand. You can't just say, oh, now I have had some wonderful insight and now I'm enlightened. It's a skill that you build, like going to the gym. You don't go to the gym and all of a sudden have great guns.
Mm-hmm.
You work at it. You don't go to the gym the day before you have to help your friend move into his second floor apartment.
Right.
You go to the gym before that. You build. So it's the same thing with meditation. You build up, these skills. But one of these skills is a very deep knowledge and an understanding of the ephemeral nature of your thoughts. Okay. So one of the thoughts that is hyper important when it comes to weight loss is, I want something to eat. I want to get something to eat. Not even I'm hungry. It's not even I'm hungry, because you might not even be hungry. Just wonder what's in the refrigerator. It's just a thought that comes in your head. Or I'm bored, or this is a good chance, or my wife's gone, I can eat some popcorn now. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, the thought comes in your head. And when you have become familiar with the fact that it's just a thought, and you can just kind of sit back and instead of buying into the thought and being the thought, you can step out and watch it. Maybe you even giggle a little, because it really is kind of comical that what this thought is. And you watch it, and inside of 10, 15, 20 seconds, it'll float away, and especially, if you decide, oh, here's that thought, let me open up Wordle, and I'm gonna do a Wordle, or I'm gonna do a crossword puzzle, or there's that thing that I've been putting off, or let me go see if I've got any matches on Podmatch. The moment that if you see it, you give it a second, it'll be gone in just a moment, and then you'll be on to something else, and it goes. So that's one of the ways. That's one of the ways that it can help with weight loss. One of the ways.
Yeah. And yeah, I like that point. I mean, I find that sometimes people can be impulsive with things. Like, I'll just bring it to golf again. They have a bad round or a bad shot. And I know you're talking about thoughts, but they're like, oh, I need to do this. But it's like, okay, don't overreact over. I always tell the kids, don't overreact over a shot or a whole round, because in the scheme of things, it's such a small trial size of what you are. Same with the thoughts, right? These are little bubbles, like you mentioned, that come and go. And if you don't put so much weight to each of them and you just give it time, you'll realize that that's all that was. And there's no reason to put added weight onto whatever that was, a thought, a shot, or whatever that.
Exactly. Or you might decide, this is a helpful thought. This is a good thought. I want to add this one to my inventory. I want to add this one to my repertoire because this is useful. And so you do this kind of going through the attic of your mind process. You're saying, well, this thought is helpful. This thought may not be so helpful. That doesn't mean it won't come back.
Right.
It'll come back. And every time it comes back, if you just greet it, you don't try to stop it. Because the moment you try to stop it, you give it energy. You greet it, you say, oh, there you go. It's like that Simon and Garfunkel, hello, darkness, my old friend. So here's this thought again. Oh, there you are, my old friend. Okay. And then it goes away, and then it comes back again. But, the funny part about it is, if you greet it and you befriend it and you recognize it and you don't judge it, it will, all of a sudden, there'll come a time when you go, oh, I haven't had that thought for a while. It just kind of stops on its own. It's kind of like a nerdy little brat who wants to bother you, and the more attention you give it, the more bother Some it becomes.
And if you just let it be and don't put any attention to it, then eventually they'll go away.
Yeah, this guy's no fun.
Right, exactly. It's like when you're young and maybe there's, I know there's bullying that goes on, but like the more attention you put to that, if something's bullying you, the more they're going to want to do it, right? Same concept there. Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. Well, this was great, Bob. Where's the best place for people to learn about your work and what you're doing?
Well, I've got everything. I've brought everything together on my website, which is called awiseandhappylife.com.
Nice. I like that.
And if you want to know more about meditation, people ask me all the time. Of course, don't let me not say that I do offer online courses and the like, and you may or may not be ready for that. But, I do also have lots of resources because my passion really is spreading the word that meditation can be a wonderful solution for so many aspects of life. I've got 56 gigabytes of resources, instruction pamphlets, all of it, guided meditations, videos, all of it freely downloadable. But you would best place to start would be, is meditation for me, what it is, what it's not, and how to do it. A little 40-page ebook that's absolutely free, no obligation. You just go to my website, awiseandhappylife.com, and you can click on it and download it, and it's a great place to start.
Yeah. And I'll just say from my experience, I think it's just about starting. Like just start small and just, sit there, be present or as much as you can, whatever that means. But like, I think sometimes we get fearful or we're like afraid to, we think it's this big thing, and it really isn't the more you do it. So yeah, this was great. I will put links in the show notes for people to find you and learn all about what you're doing. And yeah, I appreciate the message that you're sending on and all you've done. So thank you.
Thank you. It's not easy to put a podcast together, and for you to do it, for people like me to be able to come on and, blah, 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 is a real act of love. And it makes a huge difference out there in the world. So I owe you, and I think all your audience owes you a big thanks.
Yeah, well, I know doing a podcast is my 5th year, give or take, but like, you send messages out to the world and sometimes you don't know who's going to get it, but as long as it could impact, one person and help change them, I think it's all worth it. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangryn.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again and have a great day.